Hey everybody, welcome back to Magic Orthodoxy. Today we got something pretty special because we are going to do a little interview. As you can see on the screen, we got Peter Turner with us and Pigcake, and they are going to talk about their new project. And we're really super excited to see that psychological influences and psychic stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, well, thank you for having us, David. I said to Pigcake, so Pigcake came along for the journey, and this project, so we're very square. This project is of my creation. Pigcake came, captured my vision, and helped me along the way, and also has thrown in some really good ideas and suggestions that I didn't know if he were going to be capable of, but he was. And I said
Thank
to
you, Peter.
there's one channel that I really wanted to go on because you've always done amazing reviews. You've always looked at everything retrospectively, and I love the fact that you're not biased either way. You sort of sit in the middle, and then you'll ask the questions that are slightly uncomfortable, and some questions are real nice. I don't mind that. Just so I can
good.
say on camera, if there's anything you want to ask me, if there's any criticisms you've read online, if there's absolutely anything, I'm an open book. I don't know what you're going to ask me. I don't mind. But yeah, I just thought it just to give back to you because you've done so much for me. So, I'm
Awesome.
glad that you're
Thank
having
you.
us. But yeah, so the project that we're talking about is the Psychic Survival Kit, which has launched recently on Kickstarter, and I'm hoping that we can put a link in the description if we could be cheeky and plug it a little bit.
Yeah,
But this has been an epic journey that's taken me from the West Coast in America all the way over to the East Coast. And I rented an RV, and what I did is I stopped at psychic hotspots along the way to learn the secrets of the psychic, right? So I wanted to go and see what it is that they were doing that differed from what mentalists are doing. And
okay.
again, when we get into that a little bit later on, I'll talk about it. But I've always had a real interest in that world. I wouldn't necessarily say that I subscribe to the belief that there are psychics and mediums and clairvoyants out there. It's not something I believe personally. It's not to say it's not. But
Right.
I've always loved the storytelling elements, and I've always loved the willingness to want to believe something out there that we just can't explain. And also, I think it's like 2 degrees of separation from magic, which for me is a really interesting area to sort of meander through and navigate. So yeah, that about sums it up. If you've got any questions on anything, like we could get those out of the way, and I could talk about the props and other things, and do whatever you want. This is your show.
How long has the project been in making? How long?
I actually took the idea at the end of my time with Illusionist to Illusionist, and the original idea were never going to be a box. So the original idea were going to be Lewis LeVal and I sat down talking about esoteric style mentalism. Now, in
Yeah.
between that, Lewis and I worked on a couple of television shows over the last. Well, in fact, we worked on a few more than that, but two very closely, and we actually lived in a house together, a production house in a place called Mill Hill in London. And during that time, we said, if we get a chance, let's shoot some of this stuff, and we'd sit on a night and jam it out. And then Lewis actually released a couple of little bits on his own, through Mindhouse Productions. And they were really just tipping, putting the toe in the water when it comes to this stuff. We never really got to sit and have full in-depth discussions. We never really got to
Yeah.
finish it. And the idea was originally going to be like, are we going to go, are we going to do it? And then he were going to be a part of it, and are we going to get other people involved? And then it started to snowball because I was like, oh, what happens if I added this? And then what happens if I did this? And if I were going to do this, this is the way that I do it. So I'd say, maybe a couple of years. But if
Okay.
I'm really asked about the actual development period, the development period's been the last 6 months. And the last 6 weeks to 8 weeks, I'd say I've probably learned more about this realm than I've ever known because I'm doing deep dives onto it. I'm researching every day, and the honesty is, from the morning that I wake up till I go to bed, Pigkit came over. He'll tell you I'm waking up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I won't go into bed till 3 o'clock for editing and researching and writing, and that went on for 6 weeks.
Well,
You
three in
know,
the
Yeah.
morning. You have to specify. 9 to 3 sounds like a reasonable
All right.
time. We're
9 to 3 in
going
the morning.
from 9 to 3 in the morning in West Yorkshire, which is the best time, especially for someone like me that likes to wake up at noon.
But that's it. So it's been a long time in the making. It's not. I think a lot of people think that these things can sometimes be a bit of a flash in the pan. They're not. I've invested thousands of pounds into it. I've had to pay for flights backwards and forwards, go into America. The RV was 6 grand on its own. That's not including food costs, expenses, and then flying pig cake backwards and forwards, more expenses, more research. And then when you're out,
Yeah.
per day, people don't realize that when I'm going to, like, let's say I go to Manchester, there's like the fuel to go there, then there's the parking costs, and then if you've got three members that are staff that are on with you, you've got to buy everybody's dinners, and then you're paying them all a
Yeah.
wage. Do you know what I mean? And some people, so there's a lot of money that's gone into it and a lot of time and stuff that's been invested into it. And I'm just so happy now to be able to put it behind me because, well, I say put it behind me, but put it to bed and almost say, look, this is the period in it, but there's still an expansion period that's yet to
Yeah.
come, depending on how the Kickstarter goes, you know?
Shot in the UK or USA or both?
Both the
Okay.
USA and England. You know
All right.
we shot in. So the depends how technical we want to get. But if I were to say the locations, we shot in Los Angeles, Joshua Tree. We shot in Arizona, Sedona, Jacksonville, New Orleans. We went over to Memphis, then Nashville, St. Augustine, Orlando, Miami. There's a
Yeah.
range of places that we've shot over, but that was just via the nature of the trip.
Mhm.
Some of the stuff that we shot I'm having to put in there as a director's cut because there were a couple of pieces. The questions were really interesting. Like the questions were really interesting, and one of them, it's not for me to go into. It's a bit of a personal thing, but you say to somebody, "I don't want you to ask me anything that's health related. I don't want you to ask me anything about any relatives that have passed," and so they
Yeah.
don't ask you that. But then they ask you something that's very close along the sides of that. And I think one of the interesting things about this project is it's enabled me the ability to be able to articulate how to answer something like that because if you're a mentalist that's dipping your toe into Q&A or dipping your toe into any sort of question answers, you're going to get that come up. And I very infrequently see people talk about how to deal with that.
Right.
So, the trip's been interesting. But yeah, so yeah, shot in the UK and
And
America.
there's some irony in the title because in the title it says psychic, and then Pigcake with your channel, you have a different take because like you do a lot of debunking
Mhm.
of psychics like how does that like mesh with like what your channel's doing? And like did you have any say in the title?
Well, yeah, we actually sort of went back and forth as to potential titles. Peter's the one that came up with the Psychic Survival Kit, which I thought was a good over-encompassing name for the actual project itself. And I do a lot of psychic debunking just because I think that they're just mentalists with a little bit of extra steps to their, pep to their step. But this project sort of reinforced that, especially seeing, in New Orleans, the card readers, and in Sedona, the crystal readers. So this and from its very beginning is more geared towards mentalists that are looking for that edge, looking for that sort of
Okay.
psychic spin to their
It's not
performances.
it's
So
not
whereas
psychic, that
yeah.
that's important to say. It's not psychic. It's
Mhm.
and that's why I always wanted that line. The only thing that you'll have to do is convince your audience you're not psychic after all, which I quite liked. It were
Mhm.
almost look, these are techniques that can make you appear to be like this, but it's
Yeah.
your responsibility to tell your audience that you're not. Do you know what I mean?
And
And
you found yourself doing that quite often in the performances that we would have these interviews post performance to these people and would ask them, oh, if I told you that all of this was a magic trick and all of this were, whatever you could ascribe to that. And they'd say, no, this was 100% real. You're 100% a psychic, which is a nice, interesting sort of development just in these performances. And that was not just isolated incidents, that was time and time again that every time we do these performances, that was the end result.
well, that's the thing. I think there's a bigger thing there to talk about that anybody who's a mentalist, a magician can learn from, and it's really interesting that, and I don't mean this as though we're egotistical, but our egos allow us to believe that whatever we label ourselves is what we are, and it's the exact opposite. It's the complete opposite. It's if you tell somebody you're a psychic and they believe you're a grifter, no matter what you do, they're always going to believe you're a grifter.
Mhm.
Sure.
If,
Yeah, yeah.
if you're a mentalist and they believe you're a psychic, no matter amount of convincing them, it's just going to make them believe that you've not yet learned of your own abilities, right? And so I found the most interesting thing across this trip was that it really doesn't matter what we label ourselves or what we think we are because we're defined by our audience, no matter how small or how big. So we
Yeah.
can guide to believe we are what we are, or don't say anything and let them make their own minds up, and then try to paint a different picture at the end. And that's what I sort of did. I approached it with I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to perform, let them make their own assumptions, ask them about it, and then say, what would you do if I told you this were a trick? And the amount of times that there were a faith healer in New Orleans, and I didn't know that this lady were a faith healer. And what I said to Pigcake is my barometer for knowing if somebody's a psychic is if I go up to a psychic and I perform for them, and I perform in inverted commas, but I perform, and they tell me that I'm a psychic, I 100% know they're not psychic, right? That was the easiest way for me to know,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And a faith healer on camera, I've got this on camera, is I do it just a simple, it's just a simple Q&A. But at the end of it, I say to her, I'm not a psychic. I class myself really as a mentalist, but that's more in line with chicanery and there's just some psychological elements to it. And absolutely told me flat out, no, you're wrong. You just don't know you don't know how to represent your own intuitive abilities. You don't know how to dig deep into that psychic well that I can feels inside you. And I'm like, no, so no matter what you tell these people, their belief is going to outweigh what you claim to be anyway. And that's
Mhm.
what I thought were interesting. And all this like labeling it the psychic survival kit. I just thought it were an interesting title. It were, it's not aimed at psychics. If it were aimed at psychics, then I wouldn't gimmick the tarot. I wouldn't bother putting gimmicks in there. I wouldn't put the Astro card in there.
Right.
We wouldn't put the Destiny card in there. The message won't be in there. I want a shared billet peaks and a notepad that does things. Do you know what I mean? It had just been solely aimed at. And look, you can sell tarot decks for $40 a pop, right? So, I could have just included two tarot decks in a little video and it'd have been making $80 just for the two tarot decks. But it's aimed at mentalists and magicians that want
Okay.
to learn how to develop their character. They want to dip their toe in this stuff. If you're a psychological mentalist, this stuff's great as well. You look at Darren in I think it was Miracles. He dedicated an entire 40-minute segment to his show as a psychological illusionist to this world,
Mhm.
and it went over a storm. So it's like, whether you're a magician or whether you're a mentalist or whether you're a psychological illusionist that want to just learn how to better your character, get better at billet work, learn how these psychics, the justifications they used. If you're caught with nothing, instead of trying to do a ham-fisted piece of propless mentalism or instead of trying to do a piece of hypnosis, some people just want to hear the answer to a question they're thinking of,
Yeah.
and you could just walk away, it's not always a case of having to show a trick. So, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And again, when we get onto, some of the stuff that are inside there, people will see. And there's very little crossover from what I've done before. There is obviously some crossover, but
That's
only
what I was
to
going to
press.
ask. Like, do you think this is a progression of your style and like what you've kind of done before, or do you think there's a lot of new things here and this is kind of like a divergent into a different area?
I'd say a meeting of both for one reason, and that's because what's what's really interesting is whenever you put a prop in somebody's hands that they've not really used before, and what I mean by not used before, like the tarot cards, I don't profess, and I say this very openly on the set, I don't profess to walk around with tarot cards. But having watched these healers, like as soon as you pull a deck of cards out in a bar or when you're sat down in a park or at a cafe, a
Yeah.
lot of people say, "Oh, my granddad did card tricks. I've seen this one," or they go, "Oh, are you going to show us a trick?" And just by the makeup of changing the print, that's it, just the print on the card and bringing them out. You can read people's futures. Can you tell me what's going to happen in my life? And their willingness to accept that you're something else other than a trickster without doing anything was solely made up from the makeup of that deck of cards. And I thought the psychology of that were interesting. Now, I have been carrying a tarot deck around because I had a couple made, a couple of like the major arcanas made, and just for the ease of being able to put one card down or get somebody to think of a card and you tell them what it is, and the reaction to it was so much greater than just let me put one card down and show you the holy grail of card mentalism. You could literally just spit out a few lines and say something, and they turn it round. And those people would be blown away. I literally saw it just from giving somebody a reading in a bar in Morley. The girl's literally like rocking backwards and forwards, hugging a friend. And I'm like, this reaction to this is wild considering that I've put less effort into it than I've ever put into any piece of mentalism that I've ever done. So I think to answer your question and what some at Pigcake said earlier, I think it's the opposite of what you said at Pigcake. You said psychics do mentalism with a few more steps added. I don't think it is. I think it's a few more steps removed. So
Yeah, no, 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 yeah, 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 you're
it's
100%
actually
right because they don't put as much effort.
yeah, it's easier to be believed for less.
Mhm.
And I like that. I actually prefer the dynamic. And the amount of times I'm doing mentalism now, and people say to me anyway, how long have you had this gift? And I have to say to them, well, it's not really a gift. You know what I mean? And that's before playing with this stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that the beauty of it. If you're watching this and you're into mentalism and you're into magic, sometimes there's an expression: the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And what we do is we try to win over people that don't want winning over. But with this, that there's not really a fight. It's not a battle that's in place. There's no you literally you're just doing a simple Q&A, and I've some just as simple as just answering a question has more power than just revealing a name. Something just as simple as saying to somebody, is there anything that you know, if you could think of it, and don't get me wrong, I don't advise people on medical stuff. I'm not there to advise people to stop, you know, seeking counsel. I'm not there to tell people. All I do is just remind people, look, you know, you have the ability inside yourself to answer this question. But just hearing that from somebody who's wearing a white cloak, is often, you know, learning how to poetically deliver it and then revealing one piece of information that's either a name that's associated with this or what the question is itself, or even a date or something. People are literally blown away, and you're no longer trying to convince them that you're the real deal. You're doing the opposite. You just have to say to them, look, no, I'm just trusting myself and I'm saying what I feel. And you don't have to feel guilty about saying that, because the answer that you're giving, 98% of it is what you've learned to deliver, and then 2% is just a little cherry on the top of the information, right? So the dynamic's the opposite way around. So to answer your question, you know, with the pendulums and stuff like that, it's been really interesting looking at what I already know and going, okay, what do I know about hypnosis, for example, and what do I know about pseudo hypnosis, and how does that relate to a pendulum? And taking two worlds and combining them in ways that they never get combined. So, for example, we all know there's a physiological response to having somebody stand with their eyes closed, they start to sway, right? We know that. So that's, but now by adding the idiomotor effect onto a second participant that's holding a pendulum, and there's an object of this person's hung to the bottom of it, and it starts to move, and then this person starts to sway. All of a sudden, you have an interesting PK effect that's relative between the pendulum and the person that's there. Add that to some other things that are put in place that, you know, are talked about on the set, and when the person lets go of the pendulum, this person falls over. You've got a miracle. You've got a PK pendulum that's moving a person. And you know, like trying to find ways to reverse it, that's the first thing I do with everything. So that's where the extension comes in. So it's like with a marked playing card, one philosophy, and I'll share this as an open secret to everybody that's on this set, is that I think mentalists and magicians often look at things the wrong way around. So what they'll do is they'll say, right, go through the deck, take a card out, and I want you to place it down on the table. So they do. And then they look at the marking and go, are you thinking of this? And I think it's the wrong way around. I think that it's ultimately more interesting when you say to somebody, you know, I feel that you're quite intuitive yourself, but recently you've been questioning your own ability to be able to effectively make good decisions. But I want to prove to you that you can do that. So I'm thinking of a card. So I want you to look at me for a second, and I want you to think of the color of that card. And then you look at them and you go, I'm going to tell you it's not that color. So just change your mind and just trust yourself. Okay, so now you know what color it is. Decide on the suit. Now I'm going to ask you to hone in on the value. Just get into the ballpark. So they do. And I go, do you think you're close? Do you think that the number you're thinking of is close to the number I'm thinking of? Oh, bang on. If they say, oh, maybe just out by a couple. Well, that's great. Now I say, okay, we'll go through the deck and take out the card you think I'm thinking of. Now there's no heat on the markings. They go through, they take it out, it gets placed face down. You casually glance, and then you can say, you know, what's interesting is that when we first did this, I know you were looking at me and you thought black card, and I corrected you. I'm hoping you corrected to a red card. And now you get your first reaction. It's like, well, wait a minute, we must have been in each other's minds. My intuition must have been working, right? But the whole approach of reversing that is actually more interesting when it comes to a marked card, and the process of using like tarot, for example. You know, everyone bangs on about like, oh, you know, it's not the sitter that finds the card, but it's the card that finds the sitter at that relevant point in their life. But then they never prove that, right? So they never give a reading and go, I'm going to give you a reading what I'm feeling. Then I just want you to take one out and let's see if it matches the reading, right? And it's that backwards approach that I've applied, that I've tried to approach through a lot of my work, but find the areas where it drives the plot instead of because the method, let's be honest, you do it right and the audience don't see the method anyway, so it's the only bit that really doesn't matter. But the trickster, inverted commas, in me loves secrets, and I love methods as well. Do you know what I mean? So I've tried to make them as fun as possible for the people that are performing, like the QR code on the back, baked into the back of the playing card. I love the idea of just saying, oh, I always keep a keepsake of every single reading that I do. Would you mind just holding the card, but please don't let me see the face of it, and just lifting your phone up to take a photograph, and the little yellow box pops up and tells you what card they're holding. And then if you don't know how to give a reading, just click in that box and it goes to a page that's dedicated to a crib sheet for that exact card. So now, even if in the heat of the moment you're flustered, you've got an entire reading system there that's built off the back of diverting you to exactly where you need to be without having to scroll through hundreds of different cards or look at crib sheets. So I thought about the ease of the method for the performer while still retaining the integrity of the performance. And that's what's covered most of this, right? And And so yeah, so we went for that. We went for a real clear cut marking system with the letters on the back of the cards. We had the back custom designed because and I wanted it to be poker size because the cumbersome size of regular tarot cards, you
Oh,
can't.
they are. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the poker sized, poker
Okay.
sized cards that are tarot sized. But and at the minute, what we've done is we've
You think
got.
real world people notice that they're not tarot size? You think that lay people even notice?
No, because they come in all range. So some of them are some tarot cards are actually like hexagonal, I suppose. They're a different shape. You find some of them that are triangulated. You find some of them that are jumbo sized. You find
Square
some
one.
that are
Yeah.
small. Even you get mini tarot that's like this big, but they don't really mass produce them in poker size. And I thought, well, so we've got three or four finishes. And like the beauty of this deck is, I've had a couple of questions, people asking me, oh, how do you intend that we protect these? Well, if you want, just put them in a black case, but these want to look battered. They want to look aged. The beauty of these is the more vintage they get, the better they look. They look like they've been around the block. They tell the story for you without you having to say it, right? And
Yeah.
I love that idea and the idea that, that looking at this, there's little to no work to know, and it's in it. And the QR code, one of the features that I love the most is that the spectator has the ability, if they notice the QR codes, they're baked into the design, to scan it. And it takes them to a regular website where they can buy ungimmicked versions of everything that you've got in the box. Right. So so it lends itself to that oh, and you might have the gift in you. If you want to scan this, feel free, you can buy the stuff over there. Do you know what I mean? And then when they go, it's sold out, so they can't purchase it anyway. But it's just like a little page.
Uh,
It's a page that they can visit where
that part's not real. Okay.
it's just it's an actual page, yeah. It's an
Right.
actual page that we've dedicated and built that takes them across to. So for us, when we scan it, what we get is the marking of the card, and it takes us to a page with a reading on it. For them, when they scan the QR code, it takes them to an actual site where they could purchase a tarot deck or crystals or other things that they find that you're using, right? So it's
Got it.
hidden. Um, and the faces are based inspired by the Rider-Waite's, which we spent a lot of time making sure that they stayed very close to the original, only making subtle changes. Like obviously they're a contemporary version of those vintage cards, but going for a brand new design, that's a lot, and also taking out the Roman numerals, which is another
Mhm.
thing because a lot of people at a quick glance can't read Roman numerals, but the system in the corner of the card's interesting because it allows you to stack them. It allows you to face stack them. Tarot by nature are one-way design, so you've got interesting subtleties that are not available to or wouldn't be thought of to regular, tarot readers. And we've dived into all of that and making sure that the edges, the reason we went for the edges and we went from to be white on the edges is because there's a routine in there that's like it's almost like an any tarot at any number, but instead of finding a tarot card, what you accidentally find in there is a blank billet. So you say, it's interesting that each one of us in our life has got years that meant something to us, and we've had questions throughout the years that we never really had answers to. So could you think of a year from your life, and then the expression about how the card finds the person? Well, they say that every single year of your life, a different card would find you. So they tell you the year. They say, oh, 18. You say, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything. You deal down, go to the 18th card. When they get to the 18th card, it's a white piece of card. And you look as if to say, what's that doing in there? That one meant to be there. You know what I mean? And then they turn it around and there's this beautiful message that answers the question. Combining that tarot with Q&A is something I find interesting. The same with the Astro card. Like I've seen these orientation based systems, and that's what it is. I'm not going to lie about the methods. I don't mind telling you about methods on this, but I wanted a card where I could guess somebody's star sign in less time than I could anagram it, less time than I could write it down and peek it. Within 5 seconds, I'd say, if somebody follows what you're asking, I mean, you can't get it wrong. You absolutely can't get it wrong. But within 5 seconds, not only do I know what star sign you are, I also know what questions you're thinking of for a Q&A routine. So I've got a good solid 10-minute act for 5 seconds of labour without seemingly ever looking.
Mhm.
Right. And that's also in the tarot cards, and there's a duplicate in there for some stuff that we've shared. And I mean, just in the tarot routines alone, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 13 routines. And then there's little systems that come off the back of those. Like, for example, I don't know if you remember the old wizard phone trick, but
Yeah.
the wizard phone trick were incredible if you had a friend, right? But the beauty of the makeup of tarot is that they've got those numbers on the side. So all somebody has to do is use the old wizard phone trick to know exactly what card somebody's picked out of the deck. And you don't need to do it. They just answer the phone and start counting, right? Which is the old method. And then as soon as they answer, you put it on loudspeaker and you say, "Oh, have you got a few seconds?" And now you can have a friend reveal exactly what the card is over the phone, and you don't need to use, like the systems and the apps that everybody else is using to do that. But we've dipped into, like I say, traditional techniques and we've revolutionized them. So the crossover comes, and I know I'm going around the house in it, but the crossover comes in just my philosophy of the way I think. But I've never done anything with crystals. I've never done anything with pendulums. I've never done anything with tarot cards. And look at 21. That's an effect that I have released before. That does make
Yeah.
an appearance here, right? It does make an appearance. So there is crossover.
Crossover. Yeah.
But the reason that that makes an appearance is because ultimately it is a bit of a weird process when you use playing cards. Deal 2 packets of cards down. Well, now being able to say, look, nobody knows what the future holds. So you're going to deal down 11 cards here and 11 cards here, and one of these is going to represent your past and one's going to represent your present. And all you've got to do is decide, do you want a reading about your past or something that's happening currently in your life right now? And you'll let me know just by picking up some of the cards from either one of those packets. But the beauty of being able to frame and present now means that a lot of the things that and I only use that just to show you that philosophy, a lot of the tricks that you spent years learning as a magician with cards that have these weird procedures, like, oh, we need 4 packets here. Well, that doesn't look weird when you see the spreads that psychics put on their
Sure.
tables using tarot
Yeah.
cards. So it justifies all the years of work and those forgotten about tricks that we put in our bottom drawer, and it breathes new life into them and makes it feel exciting again, right? And real. And then, like I said, all you have to do is convince them that it's not. So there is a couple of little bits like that, but in terms of a lot of the other stuff, it's all brand new, and I've never done a marked tarot. I've never, mixing that with Q&A, mixing that with the pendulum stuff, mixing the pendulum with the bag, the crystals with
Right.
the bag, the crystals with the cards. There's so many different variables and routines that it's all brand new. When you look at it,
Yeah.
it's all new. Anyway, I'm going on.
So, ju- uh, just well, let's clear things up so that if there's anybody that's like has a short attention span, what's the base retail right now? If they haven't gone to Kickstarter yet, they don't know. Do you know what the base retail for just the box is?
Is that on the? Are we still in the early bird? So I don't know when this goes out, but it might
Sure.
potentially be the early
Tomorrow.
bird. Oh, tomorrow. Okay, so what's the base? Is that $135?
Yeah. So right now the base early bird special is 135, and then we're going to take it up to I believe 150.
49.
Yeah,
149.
149 as
Okay.
the regular price.
And
But also,
we've mentioned Mark tarot cards.
Mhm.
We've mentioned the pendulum,
Mhm.
and we've mentioned the crystals. So what other objects are in the box?
so there's the Astro card that's inside there.
Okay.
There is, but that will come connected to your tarot set, but it's to be kept separate, which we
Separate
talked.
trick. Right.
It's a completely separate trick. There's the fortune trick, which is basically a card where you give them, it's a life test card. Do you think you're where you're meant to be in life? And they read it and perform it to themselves. And they find you don't even do anything. You just sit back and let them perform it to themselves, and then it
Right.
turns out that their destiny were perfect. That's in there. Then there's the bag, which has got, the pocket and the switch device. And the way that I'm working it, and again, these things, like I say, there's some R&D that's going to be done in between, depending on how high the Kickstarter goes, because it depends on how much time I've got into development, how much budget I've actually got to give to these engineers to do it. That all makes a difference, because I'm not a big magic company that has the backing of different factories and other things. I'm going to find people to do this,
Yeah.
and that takes R&D. But what I want for the switch bag is the drawstrings. I want to be able to pull one of them and it open one pocket, and pull the other and it closes the other pocket. And I think that's going to be done with like a figure of eight. It's just a
Okay.
configuration on the strings.
Yeah.
But that means you can get them to open it and they'll do the switch for you. So that's in there. There's a notepad that at this moment in time's got a couple of little bits built into it, but it holds billets. And if you wanted to put your own business cards and billets in there, but it makes it look like a sketch pad. So instead of you carrying around like a blank billet and going, you know what, take this and write on it, which in itself looks a bit weird, right? In the real world, I mean, some people might feel as guilty as me. It's not a business card. But I just liked the idea of having a place to hold my billets that made it look like it had come from a notepad. So that when I opened it, I could use it as a pad and I could show it and I could repeatedly use it, but I could tear billets out of it, and now these were full-size billets that to them just look like quality sketch paper, right? Or quality.
So there is some billet magic on the project.
Yeah, there's a lot. I go over a hell of a lot. There's a really beautiful center tear on there, which the spectator does. So you get them to, you say to them, I want you to fold that up and I want you to tear it. And then they
Okay.
drop the piece and they do the center tear for you. There's a thing called Bert's Move. I talk about my version of the Acidus Novus, which is very different to the original. I also talk about, there's one peak on there that I can't share, but I talk about the mechanics of where to get it. There's the notepad peak, there's a shuffle peak, which is crossover top palm peak. There's the original OG version of Sneak Thief or Graphology, but then I've added my version of it, which allows you to be able to reveal so much more information on there. There's a routine called the Fortune Cookie, which I've not released. I've not talked about in the past, but everybody asked me about it years ago. There's the Psychology Peak in version 2. There's a full version of the one ahead, but it's not the traditional version of the one ahead. So it's not like you're going to write this and then this happens. I talk about all the different ways that you can justify the fact that this must have been written before. From pen color to orientation to scribbling bits out to being able to show somebody first to using a whisper to confirm the one ahead. There's the notepad switch. There's the beautiful open-handed switch. I just showed you a video if I knew how to share the video. But there's a peek back at looking at all this stuff and how you can get the most out of billet work, but how to lead it in, where to peek a billet. That's another thing. Like what we tend to do is go write this down and then this is what it is. Ways to seemingly start revealing information and almost get to the point of revealing it, and then say, oh, you know what? Now write it down. That's when the move happens that you need, and then you're revealing it. There's a really beautiful bit called couples, which is like a mixture of the pendulums, where somebody will write down their name on a billet, they'll fold it, and they'll pin it to the bottom of the pendulum, and then it's a load of tented billets laid on a table. Now, I don't suppose that most people will do this unless it were like a wedding or a prepared performance or a performance that's going out on social media. But I love this. It looks so nice where they're hovering their pendulum above all these different bits of card, and it starts to spin over the top of one of them. And when it starts to spin, they open it and they found their partner's name out the entire table of names. And you start and you end completely clean, and all the other ones can be opened if you want. They don't have to contain anything if you don't want to burn your billets. But and then there's mixing like the billet work with the bag, and then mixing the billet work
Okay.
with the crystals. So
Sure.
everything's sort of got this line that sort of mixes.
Crossover.
Yeah, and the box itself. So, one thing I always found about the original boxes is that they look great on a shelf. I said that in the trailer. They look amazing. But, what happens if you want to actually use it? So what we've designed is a Q&A OM switch box into the actual box itself. And the design's printed on the bottom of the box. So you can either mount it the opposite way around to you normally mount it, and it's got a design on it, or you can put it face down. Spectators drop billets into it and it steals them out. But I have a full section on the switch box. Now, a few years ago, I consulted for a guy called Chris Mallon. People won't know Chris Mallon unless you're in the bizarre world. But he designed this really beautiful circus style switch box. And I have to say, outside of any other one that I've ever seen, his is the best. It's not, but it looks like an old carnival wooden box. This just looks like a box. It's a hard box that. And everything that I worked on over there, and we're talking hours of material, I brought into this. So if you've wanted to give somebody the ability to do the Q&A for you and get the answers right every single time, they'll be able to do that. I talk about the use of different colored post-it notes, going back to the original psychics that use different colored slips in different areas of the audience, how to mix the Hoy principle or the Rashomon effect with stuff like that, and other things. And it all sounds very difficult and technical, but it's not. It's like if you've ever wanted to do this stuff, it's so easy to do, but we overlook it. Do you know what I mean? Because what we do is we go, I'm not really going to carry a box around. Okay, well then use the bag as the switch device. I don't really want to carry the bag. Okay, you still have the ability to do this on 2 or 3 people using the notepad.
Mhm.
So I've given like a larger scale, a medium scale, and a smaller scale version of things. And whilst that is crossover in 3 different ways, I don't know what performance arena you're going to be performing in. So what I've tried to do is cover as many bases as possible. And I've tried to think of every angle that I can think of. And that doesn't mean for a second that I've covered everything. But I know that in the Q&A section alone, I guarantee it doesn't matter if you studied Q&A for 50 years, there's stuff in here that you're not going to have thought of, because it's my perspective on how I'd approach it. Do you know what I mean? And my creations, that's me being egotistical. It's just my view of the world is going to be different to somebody who studied it from somebody else's view of the world, you know?
Well, the content is very comprehensive. And as a person that was there sitting behind a camera, and not to give Peter any sort of compliment, because Lord knows I'm going to fight him at every opportunity. But I found myself just listening in and absorbing a lot of the stuff and realizing, yeah, this is good, workable stuff. It's not just, a pipe dream. It's actually workable stuff and easy. And especially considering that, we're also recording all these performances. So it's real world stuff. It's not just stuff for an advert. It's really, really good material. And I just found myself constantly picking little ideas. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's phenomenal. And then just finding different ways to incorporate them. So even if you're somebody that's not coming in from a psychic bend, there's still plenty of stuff to be able to take and
But
apply.
I don't think people should come in from the approach of I'm a psychic and I'm. This is not aimed at psychics. Like,
Yeah. As a mentalist,
that's
as a
the thing.
mentalist.
Even a magician, look, like I said earlier, this stuff's actually. I find this is easier than some mentalism, and the reason it's easier than some mentalism is just via the makeup of the prop, you're not having to fight for the believability factor, right?
You saw it in Miami. You saw it in Miami that you were there just, putting all the stuff on the table and people were coming up to you saying, "Oh, what are you doing? Are you doing something? Are you reading or what?" And then you got into effects just by the virtue of having a tarot deck out or having a crystal out, that people were coming up to you and requesting performances and you didn't have to do anything.
And I thought it were interesting. And I've got this on camera. I'm going to try to snip this bit out now, actually speaking about it to put it in because I've not. But they're having conversations at the side where a guy is literally betting other people that I were a real psychic. I'll bet you $100. Right, you owe me $100 now. Like a guy who sat down as a skeptic were betting his friends $100 that I was psychic. And I were having to say like I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, shh. Like, but
yeah, that's great.
There's so much like, and that's not even getting into the Q&A, like because the Q&A don't have to involve billets. It doesn't have to involve slips. Like I talk about like comprehensively how to answer questions and how to use anything as an oracle, and the plots are interesting. Like one thing that I'll say and I'll share again. It's another technique or another method, but I'm really starting. I'm a lover of premise, right? That's one thing that I'm a big fan of. And if I'm ever working on something, I'll try to create the most impossible version of it and then work backwards. So, for example, like the app, the Stranger app, like instead of just ringing somebody and somebody goes, "I'll be down in a minute," and it's like, right, no, we've picked a playing card. I'm a magician. What card are we thinking of? And then they go, "What are you talking about? What card am I thinking of?" The Seven of Hearts, and then people react. That plot, I think, is very flimsy, right? So what I'd do is if I were approaching that is I'd go, right, like, wouldn't it be interesting to just get them to just punch in numbers, like numbers that they feel mean something, and let's see if we can find a connection between you and the person on the other end of the phone. So they start punching in numbers, and this is not on the set, but it's just giving you an insight into how I take it and then work backwards to where I get to with the stuff in the set. And they punch in these numbers and they hit call. And we ring up and we're like, okay, let's see if we can find some coincidences. Like, let's check your star sign. They're not the same star sign. Okay, let's check to see, I don't know what your favorite food is. It's not the same food. Okay, name a playing card. It's not the same. And it looks like everything's falling to pieces. And you say, okay, where were you born? And it turns out these people were born in the same town. All right, like specifically whereabouts in that town. And it turns out they were born in the same place. And what you realize after you get further down the line is that both of them were adopted out at birth and they've rang their adopted sibling, right? By accident and they reconnect. Now we know that that's never going to happen. We know in a million years that's never going to happen, right? But just something as simple as peeking somebody's address and texting that information to a friend and having that person look on Google Street View and look at shops and destinations on that street. And it turns out that these people were neighbors that pass each other every day, but just didn't know it. You weren't in Starbucks this morning, were you? I think I walked past you, like, and now, because they're never going to meet each other, so it doesn't make a difference. But just by looking at that Google Street View, we've almost got a miracle there that's much bigger than a card. And I'm getting really bored for myself of asking somebody to think of something. So for me, it's as much of a red flag as like when you're doing a Swami routine, right? And I said again, I've said this somewhere else, but when you're doing a Swami routine, what everybody does is they're holding the piece of card and they go, okay, what number are you thinking of? And they go 28, and they go, really? Why did you think of that number? Right? And that one line is just a line for me that everybody uses, and I'd much prefer it if there were a group of people at the table And I said, okay, now I'm thinking of a number, and I want you all to think about what you feel this number could be. And I'm going to pick out who I feel is the most intuitive. So if you look at me and think of your number, this implies that I'm reading them to know what their number is. Okay, I don't think it's that number. So you look at me, definitely not that number. You look at me, you're close. I'll tell you what, I think you're going to be the closest, but let me just check. You think of yours, that's not it. Yours is not a million miles out. Okay, I'm going to tell you that yours is a little bit lower than what this is. So just change your mind. Okay, what number do you think it is? And they say 26, and you're okay. What did you think it was? And as soon as they start speaking now, everybody's looking that way. So there's no attention here. You write it, you switch hands. What about you? What about you? But you didn't. What did you think it was? And all of a sudden they turn it round and it matches, right? But that suggests that you've read four people's mind at the table. It suggests that
Yeah.
somehow you knew this person's were the closest, but they weren't bang on and they adjusted it to get it perfect. That's a better approach because it isn't a red flag. And I think that for me, increasingly, just saying to somebody, think of a number, is becoming for me a red flag. I don't think it's leading them down the garden path. So something as simple as sitting there in a perform, and sometimes you don't have time to do this, and that's a different factor. But if you ever have artistic liberty, just sitting there and smiling and saying, you know, I often wonder, being how old I am now, what things kids will never really experience or think about now we're older. And like David Penn and I had this conversation talking about milk bottles in the UK. Birds used to peck holes in at the top of them, right? Like we don't experience that anymore. And one thing I used to do when I was a kid is I'd sit at the window whenever there were a storm outside, and I'd watch the lightning flicker across the sky, and I'd just close my eyes and I'd just count, just till I like heard thunder rumbling, so I could work out how far away the lightning was from my house. So I say, does anybody else want to relive that for nostalgic reasons? And so we get somebody, they close their eyes. I get everybody to take their phones out and put it on flash. Say in a moment, you're going to see the flickering of light, and I want you to imagine it's lightning. And everybody takes a photograph, and you just see the little flickers of light through their eyelids. And you say, I want you to silently count in your head till you just imagine hearing thunder rumble. And when you do, take your time and open your eyes. And they slowly open their eyes, and you just look at them and go, right now, you've got a number inside your head that nobody knows. And we're into the number, right? Like, and I love little lead-ins like that. And it doesn't have to be long. It could be one sentence or one paragraph. It could be just one thing that makes the difference. You know, in a memory divination, I've talked about it on one of my YouTube videos, that just that simple question, if you could choose between keeping every single memory you've ever made and never being able to make a memory again, or erase every memory you've ever made and only be able to make memories from today, which would you choose? Right? Like that little powerful question when everybody goes, oh, it's one paragraph or one sentence. But then finding somebody that would get rid of all their old memories and asking them, could you think of one memory that you'd know that you'd grieve to live without? You'd almost feel depression having to live without that memory. And they say, yeah. And you say, that will always be the most important memory to you. And I know it's hard to leave behind. So I'm going to give you one chance to bring it forwards as an emotional piece of baggage. And then you break the tension just by smiling and saying, you know what? I don't know why they call it emotional baggage and why they don't call it grief case. Right. And just breaking, you know what I mean? That little joke, right? It's a bit, but it brings it back to the realms of performance. And then you give them the billet. And now all of a sudden, that memory, everybody knows the magnitude of how important that one memory is by the frame up of the paragraph that comes before it. And that's missing a lot. You know, normally it's right, think of a memory, take this, write down that memory. Okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. But I just love that idea of like dancing through that memory with them. Do you know what I mean? And stepping inside there. And that's really what this box is about. It's like you can present it with its bare bones, but I also show you how to find these compelling presentations. I talk to you about how sometimes look at the power of that video where I just sat with people on a park bench and they literally burst into tears. It's like the amount of times that we speak, and I'm the worst for it, I could talk the glass eye out of a dead dog, but the amount of times that we speak when sometimes people just want to sit there and just want to feel like they've said something and had a conversation with somebody. And in Morley, I did this and you saw it. And afterwards I asked questions and the girl that were there thanked me and she said, you know, I've never been able to get that off my chest. Never been able to get it off my chest. And it feels like the weight of something has just been lifted. It finally felt like I got to say it out loud. And that for me were enough to know that even just sitting for a minute in silence were equally as powerful as answering a question physically. And I didn't have to do any work, didn't have to do anything. And when I show you the technique of how to get into that, how to you know, what you're supposed to do when you're in that, and then at the end of it, exactly what to say to make it seem like you know. And that's another thing. is on this set I talk comprehensively about one thing that I never talk about. And if you and you've seen me enough times doing this, you brought up the other day, Pigcake, is there's a lot of times where I'll make it seem like I know something that I don't know. And I make them buy into that without having to say what it is that I know. And I teach you ways to do that. So, whilst you've got this one piece of information that's written on a billet, or you've got the one piece of information from a tarot card, or they're holding a crystal and you know what it is, speaking about the things that you don't know and convincing them of that. And then they leave. And I've literally heard them talk to their friends afterwards and say, you know what? I'm mind blown how he could have known about that. And I never said it. And I didn't need to confirm it, but just the
Right.
ability of using a couple of those techniques that I've seen so many psychics using and mediums using, I've been able to translate that into a language that we can capitalize on 100% of the time, or 99.9% of the time. I won't say 100% because nothing's definitive. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, anyway. So hopefully that answers that question. I went around the houses a bit. Passionate,
Um,
that's big kid. Passionate, I'm English.
And you got tea in you.
Yeah, I've got tea in me, caffeine.
yeah, and you mentioned numbers, so you said like 13 tarot cards tricks. Do you have a do you know how many tricks are taught on the entire project ish?
Do you know what? I had a look, and so when I say this number, please let me caveat it by saying don't think that this is overwhelming, because you don't have to get this and learn all the tricks. It's not about
Right,
that. It's the
right.
same as an album. I'd say there's probably about 50.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'd say it, but some of them are just
Yeah,
little throwaway things. Some of
sure.
them, so I won't definitively go, yes, I'd class this as an effect. Some of them are little subtleties and offsets of other things. But every one of them, what I've tried to do, and this is the honesty, I don't want people to think, oh, only he can do that, or you've got to perform for 20 years to better do this. I wanted everything to be as easily digestible as everything on How to Read Minds 1, and I wanted everything to be more easily executionable. So if you don't
Okay.
have the confidence to do this stuff, or you don't have the confidence to approach somebody, that's what's beautiful about these props. Like Pigcake says, you don't need to approach people. People come up to you. People will come to you and ask you about it. Oh, you do this, and the amount of conversations that I've got into where I say, oh, and even and one of the sections that I talk about is saying, oh, I met a psychic and they told me that I had an intuitive ability, and I don't really know whether to believe it, but they told me that I'll doubt myself, so I'm just learning to develop that. And so now you're not saying that you're psychic, but you're saying that somebody said that you are and that you're trying to develop it. And that's a great lead in if you ever want to try something and
Yeah.
you're a little bit rocky eyed. You know what I mean? But I talk about all the justifications of how to talk about these props, how to bring them into a performance, how to use what props you've already got in place of the props that are here. So let's say you didn't want to use tarot cards, but you wanted to use playing cards. I offer the alternatives. I mean, I won't recommend it, but I still offer those alternatives because some people don't want to walk up to somebody with a tarot deck. And I get that.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
And you probably
So
haven't finished editing the video yet, though, right?
everything's edited, more or less
Oh,
everything's edited. I've spent
do you
all
know
the
how
time.
long it is? Do you know how
Um,
long the tutorial is ish?
so it's not like what we've done. We've put so it's not like How to Control Minds in the sense that where you had to watch that to watch the performances. We've done a
Hmm.
separate documentary. And the documentary itself is a behind the scenes of us going to these psychic places and finding out information. And then what we do is like in Sedona, for example, really weird. I show the flyer, I show it in the shop, and I'm like, look, you can see this flyer. And we go into these. They get you to take your phone and put it in a Ziploc bag, and they get you to put your phone in a drawer, right? So you can't really record what's going on. So both of us went in there with the intention of we're going to learn and remember the best techniques that are translatable, and then we come out. And then when we get outside, we talk about it. We talk about what we experienced inside. We go over to New Orleans. We talk to faith feelers and card readers, and then I take that information. So that's on that set in itself.
Okay.
Extra additional stuff that are not necessarily performances, but more behind the scenes of us getting stuck in the desert and other things. And then what you find is a section on the tarot cards, which goes down and shows you all performance explanation. Now, what I've tried to do is get as many live performances as possible. And what I did say to Pigcake is that I'd love to, if I do go back out to the States, which is my intention in a week's time or so, to go back out to Miami and try to collect more performances of other things that from the time I've got back, I've actually added to the set. So what I did is I had an initial number of stuff, captured those performances. Then I came back, and when I sat in the chair, I just let myself speak. So, but I kept it very concise. This is a section. This is 20 to 30 minutes long. This is a section. This is 20 to 30 minutes long. So to give you an honest answer, I don't know. It's hours long, but it's in digestible pieces, right? It's
Okay.
in digestible pieces. So the tarot thing, the very first one, the basic tarot, the explanation's 5 minutes long. And what I tried to do is offer, because I had this debate with Pigcake, I tried to offer a very basic explanation to start within the explanations, so that if you are somebody that's already in this world and you already know about this stuff and you just want to click off at that point, you know the secret now and you can go. If you want to watch it a little bit more in depth, see my reasons for saying and choosing this approach and this, you can go in a little bit more depth. So it's comprehensive and then in depth in the same explanation, but each one of them, and I do say at certain ones, if you want to click off at this point and that's how you want to present it, that's absolutely up to you. But I'd recommend watching it and seeing. So I've tried to cater for both audiences, which is something that I've read as a criticism. But ultimately, David, one thing I do want to say is, it's impossible to please everybody all the time. You can't do it. Like
Oh yeah.
you can't do it. And some people are going to agree with some of the choices of the props. Some people are not. Some people are going to go, well, I do this and I don't think this is ethical. And some people, look, the ethical question is, you could take this stuff and if you can't dilute it to perform it the way that you find it ethical, then I think that there's something wrong. You know what I mean? Because all of this is digestible. And if you want to perform it as a magic trick, you could. You could perform it as a comedy bit if you wanted. You could perform it as a straight piece of mentalism that's examining how easy it is for psychics to fool psychologists and scientists. You can approach
You
this.
think this stuff's a little bit more adaptable than some of your
Oh,
script-based tricks?
yeah, like the script-based stuff is always hard, and it's a lot harder because you have to actually learn it and go out and do it.
Right.
That's the thing, and there's no better substitute than real world experience. Now, a lot of those script-based things, and it's very difficult to put across, is equivocal choreography. The idea is that I approach every single piece as a piece of equivoque, and like this is happening, these are the nodes and the signs that I see, and I move off this way or this way and
Yeah.
perform. Like, and I don't expect everybody to be able to do that. Whereas this stuff, it's like, you want to do one card, fine. If you want to do three cards, do three cards. If you want to mix two cards with the Astro card, fine. If you just want to do a basic Q&A, perfect. If you don't want to use billets, you could just give them a reading and just do the simple clickbait Q&A. So it's a lot easier to digest. And even if you just took the base, I swear to you on this, and this is not me just saying it, if you took just the basic Q&A, the very basic Q&A, you could probably have enough there to. Geller did it. I'm not saying Geller's fake, but you could convince the world that you were the real deal if you wanted with just one of the pieces in there. This is a whole palette full of paints, and I'm giving you the brushes and the paints, and then I'm putting the numbers on the board for you to paint to. Whereas
Okay.
before, it relied a lot more on the person. The first kit didn't.
Right.
The first kit didn't, and it's more in line with that. It's more in line
Okay.
with it's more in line with that than how to control minds. Like I said, how to control minds. Uh, I, I think I maybe overestimated how easy that was. Do you know what I mean? I think I looked at it and thought, to me, it's not difficult. I do it all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's not
Sure.
really that hard for me. But this stuff, it's prop driven. So it's like the Astro card. If you just put that Astro card into your wallet, you literally just put the Astro card in your wallet and went out, you'd be able to do a Q&A routine and the star sign divination and repeat it over and over and over again. The questions will always be different and the star sign will always be different, and you don't need to do anything. That could be your entire act. If you're in a pub, if you're in a working environment, look at it like the credit card, the fraud credit card, but with a greater impact. Like, this is actual stuff that people are interested in, instead of, oh, just think of one number on this credit card. This is, I could tell you your star sign, I can tell you the question you're thinking of, or I can tell you both and I don't have to do anything because it does it for me.
So you think this kit is more prop driven?
Oh
Is that what
yeah,
you're saying?
100% more prop driven. Yeah, 100%. Like, everything
Okay.
in it is everything in it is driven by the props inside directly. There's very little to learn psychologically, although there is obviously a section on cold reading. Now, cold reading is scripts, so
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that that's on there. But I teach you a system to use your props to be able to give a reading, so that you don't have to remember things, and that's also important. It's not just you guessing and going, oh, I don't know how to talk eloquently about this cup. It's not like that. It's like, Really simple. It could be one sentence, one paragraph, and you've always got your fallback of the prop or the thing that you're
Mm.
reviewing, right?
Yeah.
So, so I'd say it's more prop driven. Yeah, 100%.
So if I were a hobby magician and I typically only perform for family and friends and the kids at school, like, is there stuff in this kit for me, or is this all stranger magic? Like I have to perform for somebody I don't know at all, and I'm guessing their star sign.
See, that's a great question. So that the star sign element there, you're going to know your family star sign,
Okay.
right? So you're going to know your family star sign, but just by saying to them, I'm working on something at the minute. I'm doing a deep dive into psychics and looking at a psychological approach to those psychics, and I don't know how it's going to go. But could you think of maybe a friend's star sign for me, and just take that piece of card and have a look on there. And I want you to look up at one of the questions that just jumps out to you. It could be any one you want that just jumps out, the one that best appeals to you. Put that away. I'm never going to look. And then all of a sudden you start to give them the reading of the question and finish with a star sign. Like even for friends and family, they can pick one at random. It doesn't have to be naturally driven by it being yours. You could even say, look, I obviously know yours, or it won't be difficult for me to find out. So I want you to pick one at random. Usually I do this with somebody's, but for the purpose of this, because we're doing a deep dive into how psychics work, just pick one at random. Do you know what I mean? So even as a
Yeah.
hobbyist or something at school, you could do that. You could take it. If somebody doesn't know star signs, you might say, well, the younger generation doesn't know star signs. That doesn't make a difference. And the reason it doesn't make a difference is because you can just then get them to pick one at random and then just look at the question. Don't worry about the star sign. Just think of one of the questions on there and you could just do the Q&A. So all the options are open for you. When it comes to things like the bag's interesting because you can use it as a mat to put your cards on, so you're not having to worry about them touching the table, and you can spread them and do moves that you wouldn't normally be able to do, card style moves. I'm not saying you need to know sleight of hand, but I do talk about the basics of forcing a card and how to take something that we already know. So the cross cut is on there, but there's an interesting look at how to do the cross cut so that it doesn't feel like it, and new approaches to it. And I also go back and talk about my staggered cross cut, but a new version of that, right? So using that and switching, that'll switch stuff in and out. The bag's used to switch stuff in and out. So you could use that on your friends and family. You could have your friends and family have articles inside there, and they could all reach in, and you could guess what each one of them's got. So and you're not limited to just using the crystals. You can use other things. You can put little objects and items inside there. You can use the bag if you're not comfortable with a billet switch, for whatever reason your hands are not working properly, or you're not proficient when it comes to a switch or a peak. Literally by saying to everybody, just drop yours in the bag. In fact, you know what? Take it back out, put your initials on it. That moment it's switched out the billet, and now you're one ahead. So you don't have to physically be able to do a switch. The little bag can do that for you. But learning that psychological offbeat and knowing those techniques, that's what I'm sharing there. If you can deliver that one line, in fact, put your initials on it, reach back in, they take it out. You're done. You don't need to do anything. It's done for you. So it's aimed at everybody. Whether you've been in this for a month, if you've been in this for a day, you've been in this for a year. There's going to be something that you can do. If you've been in this for 20 years, 30 years, like I said to you, I sat with Terry Tyson, who's arguably one of the greatest, pendulum workers on the planet right now, one of the greatest esoteric workers. And he heard a few of my ideas last week whilst I were doing something for Reese. Asked Terry his opinion. Terry sat there and we're like I've been doing pendulums for years, and I thought about this stuff.
Mm.
There's a way that's on there where it's a regular pendulum that the spectator holds. They're holding it, and yet I can force 99.9% of the time. And again, I'm using 99.9% of the time because the pendulum snaps or they just don't pick it up or whatever. 99.9% of the time, the exact thing you want to force. And it doesn't have to be a forcing pendulum. I talk to you about techniques to make that happen, that trigger that response in them to start moving it. I talk about how you can take that and use it. And, instead of just doing a simple out of this world, there's a beautiful little version on there that uses positive and negative emotions or trigger words. And the beginning bit and the end bit is like the 50-50 at the beginning. You should have seen the reaction on it that we got in Orlando. It was unbelievable. I said to Pigcake, I said, oh, the first one might be a little bit flat, but then it builds and builds. The first one, just by changing one thing in the general out of this world routine to something that I haven't really seen anybody doing out of this world, they're literally holding the pendulum over the top. It starts to spin. They turn it round and they lose their mind. And then we do it again with the emotions, and they genuinely have a free choice every time. It's not, there's no forces. So as long as you just listen to what's said, you can't get it wrong. And then the last one, really simple, really easy. And then you've got a beautiful, and it's not long. So it's not like you're dealing out 52 cards and separating all the reds from the blacks. This serves a purpose, and it's just 5 cards on each side, starting with 1 card. The pendulum, it'll do the work for you if you want at the back end using the technique that I talked about earlier on, mixing that technique with the back end. And I talk about that crossover. So it's accessible to anybody, accessible to anybody. And also, let's say that you're not confident in your first trick, and let's say that because I do talk about how to get through the nerves of a performance. Like, look, when I just put the video up of me doing Blackpool and walking into that room, knowing how many people are inside that room, it doesn't matter who you are. Like, it can be nerve-wracking. Like, and if you don't have that nerve before you go up on stage, then you're not properly prepped. Talk to any fighter that's going into the ring to fight somebody, whether there's an audience of 2 people or 1,000, there's still nerves. And the moment that you're not nervous is the moment that you end up fluffing things in close up. All day long, you could send people over to me. I can deal. I've worked with now at this point so many celebrities and had to make sure things are screwed on. When we're doing a shoot that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're working with a celebrity, we've got to make sure it's screwed on and that they follow my instructions 100%. I've directed them and I've worked with them the best I can before they get on screen in front of that audience. Now, let's say that you're that nervous that your first trick, your hands are shaking, and you just need to get through that first performance. Well, that's what the inspiration for the Destiny card was. The idea that you go through, you take that 1 card out and you sit back, and all you have to deliver is that 1 line, and they read it and follow the instructions on that piece of card, and then the trick works for you. You've not had to perform, you've not had to say a line, you've not had to say a script. They're just following it, they're acting it out, and at the end, there's a revelation, and now you're comfortable with them being in your space and you're no longer nervous. So you've ridden through that first couple of minutes of nerves where you're shaking, and you're out of the other side solidly into the performance now because they're already blown away and they're bought into you. You can at that point, if you really wanted and you're still a little bit nervous, just say to them, okay, now this is this, but can you just continue to go through and take a card out, look at it and place it on the table? And all you need to do is just look at the mark on the back of it. And you could buy yourself an extra 5 minutes by giving a reading. And you never need to use your hands for that. So if you've got problems with your hands, you're worried about being nervous, you've got the shakes, you're nervous about opening, I've thought about that as well. I've thought about how to get people to approach you. I've talked about the approach. And so I'm confident that, it doesn't matter if you're a professional. Terry Tyson, like I said, is known as one of the greatest out there. He was blown away by some of the ideas I were talking about. So there's something on here. It doesn't matter if you profess to be a psychic worker or you profess to work in that industry. It makes no difference. Do you know what I mean? It's, to me, you're not viewing the world the way I view it, and I'm not viewing it the way you view it. So it's
the Kickstarter page says audience tested for real world use. Do you think that there's something even on this kit for everybody? Because it sounds like, most mentalism, and even I would argue like psychics, one-on-one is always like your best scenario for results. But like, would you say the stuff on here is probably also good for like walk around or street? Because it even sounds like a Q&A that translates to stage. So do you think
so
there's stuff on here for
Q&A,
all of the magic environments?
basic Q&A is done with one person. So and not only that, you could do a Q&A system that's on over the phone. Do you know what I mean? So if they could ring somebody if they wanted, and you could do a Q&A where they answer the question.
Yeah.
There's the pendulum where they FaceTime somebody and they think of an object in the house and they move the pendulum with their mind over this side, and you find the object they're thinking of over this side. There's a lot that's on there. I mean, to go into this being like real world, I get paid each, and I've put screenshots up of this on Facebook. So if anybody wants to say, oh, where's the proof? I put the screenshots up on Facebook. I work for Hugo Boss every single year, and they book me and they pay. And when I say they pay me a lot of money, I'm not talking about going to do a gig for $300 or $500. We're talking enough money for me to travel to London. They put me up in a nice hotel. I do 1 or 2 hours, and I make more than most people make in 2 months. And I come home, and that's it. And I do that every single year. And I've done that every single year for the last few years outside of COVID, right? I did it before COVID and I picked up afterwards. And what they pay me to do is, one year I rode in on a motorbike and I'm dressed like dark clothing and I walk around and and they know I'm not a psychic, but what they want me to do is they want me to take what I do as a mentalist and they want me to present it with a psychic edge. They want me reading palms. They want me presenting it in a way that seems like I'm intuitive. And then what they always ask me to do is, look, is there any way that you can tie in the product with what it is that we're doing just for the big finish? So I'm working in that environment, close up, in loud environments, reading palms and doing this stuff, and I've done it, and I've been paid well to do it. And that, there's a guy that's one of my friends, Dan Reed, he constantly gets me booked for an agency. I'm not going to mention because I don't want him like bombarding him for the work. But anybody wants to ask, Dan knows how much. There's gigs that I'm doing where I literally turn up, I say hello, I do 10 minutes, say goodbye, and I'm earning over £1,000 to turn up and do 10 minutes. And Dan will confirm that he's booked me gigs doing that, right? And it's real money. It's not like $200 in a little bar somewhere. But the difference between me and everybody else is I don't perform enough every week, those gigs. So I'm not Liam and all that's doing corporate events every single day of the week. I don't need to. I consult 80% of the time. I just said to you before we got on this call, I can't say what it is, but we just had some good news about another television show that's just opened up, and that's 6 months of my life that'll be zapped from that. Last year were like 3 months of my life, and then I worked on stage shows for thousands of people in Germany, and again, that's easily verifiable. I worked up for the close-up events and the corporate events for that person. I'm not going to say what it is, but I worked for a two-person telepathy act that I know are very, very famous in the mentalism world. I worked for them and I consulted for them just last year. I consulted for a television show and a stage show in Belgium last year. I worked on some bits for Netflix. So I don't earn enough money. I couldn't earn enough money performing consistently whilst I'm chasing leads and doing other things to take time away from the consistent work that I'm getting as a consultant. But what do I know as a consultant? I'm constantly designing stuff that's not for me. I have to be a chameleon and learn how to deliver it, material for the person that I'm working for to make sure it's surefire, easy to follow. And over that process, I've learned to shrink and cut everything right down and make it more digestible. And that's what you're really seeing here is, this stuff, whether you're a magician, psychological illusionist, a mentalist, whether you're a psychic, it really doesn't make a difference. Like, so is it tested on real world audiences? Every single one of these principles, when you go right down to the foundational core, right down at the foundational core, they're old. We all know of a switch, we all know of a peak, we all know of a one ahead. But it's what you do with it, it's how you dress it, it's what props you put on at the top of it, it's what angle you look at, And so all of this stuff, if you want to do a basic one card reading, you can. If you want to do a basic tarot reading, you can. If you want to do the astrological card on one person, you can. If you wanted to use the destiny card on one person, you can. If you wanted to do a Q&A on one person, you can. If you wanted to do Sneak Thief, there's a version of Sneak Thief on there that's allowed to be done on one person. So even taking something that generally and traditionally use three people, being able to do it on one person, perfect. There's a blindfold routine that you can do on there for one person. The power of silence can be done on one person. The clickbait Q&A can be done on one person. The spectator answering one of your questions can be done one-on-one. Them divining your star sign can be done one-on-one. Them being the reader can be done one-on-one. So I'd say that if you wanted to do this on one person, you can. If you want to do this on 80 people, you can. If you were to go out and do this on 1,000 people, you can. You know what I mean? It's not. And if you want to earn real money, like I say, I'm not me mentioning that gig is not me showing off because I'm saying at the back end of it, look, I'm not performing as much as some people out there. I'm not doing corporate events. I'm being open about that. But the events that I do and that I get paid for, I have done stuff like this in the real world, so I know it works. Do you know what I mean? But people asking me like I can't remember what it was. Pigcake asked me a question earlier on that somebody had said, I'm a psychic and I'm working as a psychic, but none of this stuff would ever be what a psychic does. I don't remember what he said, but he asked me that question, and I without sounding like I'm being arrogant, I almost chuckled because I bet I'm as psychic as the guy that asked that question. Like if you're saying that these techniques have not been used by psychics, well, what about Tyler Henry? I know Tyler Henry's consultants, right? Personally know Tyler Henry's consultants, and I've worked alongside Tyler Henry's consultants. So I could tell you that as one of the leading psychics in the US, he's using these techniques. I could bet my life on the fact that Uri Geller used these techniques, and he was known as the most psychic man in the world for a period of time. I've seen Sally Morgan using fish bowls and prayer cards. So I know that she does. I've visited psychics in New Orleans and seen what they're doing. I've visited faith healers. I've been to crystal workshops and listened to what they're saying. And I've been involved in this world long enough to know that if you're not dabbling with some of this stuff, You know, you're not dabbling with some of this stuff, then you're missing out on an whole area of stuff you could be dabbling on. But not only that, you must be the best psychic in the world to know what I've put on this set without me saying out loud what it was before you posted. So
Right.
it's like, and that's not me trying to be, you
Oh
know,
yeah, I know.
I
I know.
just think that sometimes, you know, like it's these questions, they don't really make sense. When you peel back one layer, it's like, well, you know, I've worked as a psychic and none of this stuff. How do you know? You don't know what's on there. Like you genuinely don't own the material. You haven't filmed it. You haven't seen me performing it. And if you have seen me performing it, then you know. But like I don't. I know psychics that are making money as professional psychics that are working in shops. You know, Reese is a good friend of mine, and Reese does that. Reese is a professional tarot reader. Reese said to me that some of the stuff that I've taught, he's never even thought of, never even thought. And you could ask him that. I'm sure he'd happily say that. You know, and that's not me wanting to attack the person. I don't know who posted it because I didn't read it.
Yeah.
I don't read these comments. I don't go onto forums anymore because what I find, and this is if you are the person that posted this, please don't think that I'm attacking you. I'm not. But what I find is that you make one comment like that. So then when I was younger, what I do is I'd adapt my way of thinking to try to acquiesce to the way that you think should be done. And then in doing that, I'd annoy two other people. So then what I do is try to find the middle line, and then all three
Right.
of you would be annoyed at me because I didn't do it your way. And that's it. And I've just over time learned that look, I'm very open. You can ask me anything about the box, anything about the set. Like I don't need to lie. I'm not sat here claiming that I earn more money than Christopher Carter doing gigs because I don't. I don't earn more money than Leah Manor doing gigs. I don't know what their accumulative wealth is for the year, but I know that I'm consulting continually. I know I'm doing this professionally. I know that I wake up every single day I'm doing this stuff. I go to bed I'm doing this stuff. If you put me in any social situation and ask me to do something, I can do it. And I'm not the same kid I was back in 2012. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not.
Yeah.
This is 13 years later, 14 years later, and I've worked with every magic company in the world, and I've been flown here, there, and everywhere, and I've learned a thing or two. Do you know what I mean? So you're getting all that knowledge of thousands of hours of daily thinking about this stuff rolled into this package. And I'd
Yeah.
recommend, even if you are a psychic and you think that there's nothing inside here for you, then you're looking at the world the wrong way around. And I had this exact argument with Reese's son, Farid, sorry, Farron. Like instead of trying to look for things that we'll never use, find things that you will. Do you know what I mean? You never know what you'll find, whether it's one sentence, one paragraph, one effect. And if you are working as a psychic, think about what I'm about to say to you here. You spend $135 on the early bird special, and you find one thing in here that you think to yourself, do you know what? That's incredible. If you genuinely are working as a working psychic that's earning top money, then all you need to do is perform that one thing and you've made your money back straight away. And if you're not earning more than $135 as a working psychic, then it doesn't really matter what your opinion is on some of the stuff. Do you know what I mean? I'm not, and that's not me denouncing you. It's just saying if that's what your stipulation is for this stuff to be workable, I'm saying find the one thing from here and go make your money back. It's an investment.
Yeah.
Well, and you've performed this in terms of just the performances themselves from this project in every single conceivable performance setting. So it's not like, we were studio performances here. You were on the street. You were in a bar in Louisiana. You were in New Orleans in the street. You were in the promenade. You were in various locations that ordinarily would be very difficult to perform in, and you were still coming across these wonderful reactions, these wonderful moments from the stuff directly in this kit, which is another testament to the power of it.
Yeah, but look, do you know what that comes down to? It just comes down to knowing that when I sit in front of these people with this stuff, I'm comfortable because I know what it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm hitting and hoping. Like, look, there's a couple of pieces on there, like for example, the crystal in the hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? I talk about physiological methods and I talk about psychological method. That's really the only psychological method you'll find on the entire box. Really the only one. But I can tell you that as somebody who's done hypnosis from the age of 12, and I've studied hypnosis, and I don't I don't claim to know all the technical terms. In mentalism, I know all the technical terms because it's a world that I'm part of and I'm talking about daily. Hypnosis, I just do it. I've done it for years and I have my approaches and philosophies on it that are very different to other people. But I've found that the success rate in just adding a crystal into the mix at that point has exponentially upped the probability rate of it happening because of the belief of what the crystal does and is. It exceeds me. And what I mean by that is that, like with hypnosis, when it's you just talking to them and expect a physiological reaction, it's based on their belief in you. Whereas when you introduce something like a crystal, what's really interesting about that is that their belief in the crystal is often enough with the belief in you to up the probability of it happening. It almost becomes the poster that advertises the hypnotist, right? And you don't need to do anything. You just literally watch. And I've seen it. They're holding on to it, and and you're just talking about the energy coming from the crystal, and then they nod that they can feel it. But because they believe in that, they've already bought into it. These are the same. These are people that believe that crystals are healing cancer. You know, I'm not saying that that's the case, and I don't
Yeah.
believe that personally. But I'm not there to shut anybody else's belief down. But it's that belief of that power in those crystals that allow us to use it for entertainment. You know, so yeah. Again, I know I sort of went off, but
Oh. Um, I know. Well, okay, Pigcake. So you and we've been as a fan, we have been fans of Peter Turner for a while. But
Unfortunately, yeah.
you're there on the street. You're on the ground floor. You're watching this happen.
Mhm.
I know, and you and I also we kind of lean more towards just traditional card magic. We like the sleights and all that kind of stuff. Like when you're watching this stuff and it's happening in real time and you're behind the camera, like what's your reaction as the observer? Because your reaction is going to be the same probably as ours when we watch it for the first time. Like, what was your takeaway from the whole project? And were there things on this that you felt like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start doing that. I'm gonna start doing that.
Well, yeah, 100%. And a lot of people don't notice about me just because of the way I portray myself on the channel. But I've been a big fan of this style of mentalism and, even hypnosis for a long time. I wanted to be a professional hypnotist forever. And it's one of those things that it's just, again, I focus myself on more practical things like card magic just for the ease of people coming into the channel, for example, and watching tutorials. But sitting there behind a camera and seeing these things that would be otherwise considered pipe dreams working and consistently, it's not just, oh, here's an idea, it might work once in a blue moon. No, these are things that are actually working consistently, is the thing that, well, it didn't surprise me because I've seen Peter perform God knows how many times, but it's otherworldly almost because even somebody holding a crystal, right? They're holding onto the crystal, and you're telling them, "I want you to let go of that crystal," and they can't. And you tell them, "No, go ahead, try to let go of that crystal," and they physically cannot until he gives them the command to open. And it's something that works. And Peter goes into great detail as to how to ensure that it works. And even if it doesn't, there's still ways to make it a success. It's unbelievable. And seeing the little bits, and what takes me back the most is also the ease of the content, because these are things that there's not sleight of hand heavy. There's barely any sleight of hand in the entire kit. For the most part, even with the billet work, it's all obtainable for people that have been into magic for more than 7 minutes. And it's one of those things that it's kind of unbelievable how much you could stretch these props and how much you could stretch the power of what people believe in them, whether they're the tarot cards, the pendulums, and the crystals, that they could take it and you could essentially have a whole act that works in this style that fits in a bag. You could carry it from place to place. Everything's self-contained. And as Peter was saying, the power and a lot of the work that you would have to put usually on your end when it comes to these sort of traditional methods of memorizing scripts is taken away by the virtue of the prop itself. So that's the other part that I just found myself constantly being in awe of, that all you have to do is just have this person hold this crystal, and by the belief in the power of what this crystal does, you manifest an effect. And you could turn that to pretty much anything, even the tarot cards, just by the virtue of the tarot cards existing. And you could do any, again, as Peter was saying, not to beat a dead horse, but a very simple trick. But just by the properties and the subtleties, it turns into a miracle by just the virtue of the prop, which is a very interesting approach in this set. And it's very different than what you've done traditionally, Peter. But I think it's very valuable because, again, anybody could take anything. And even me, that's traditionally somebody that's focused entirely on card stuff, but I have a very big interest in mentalism. I have a very, very big interest in hypnosis and waking hypnosis and all these techniques where it doesn't look like hypnosis, but it still has the effect of that. It's mind blowing. And again, I want to fight Peter at every opportunity that I have. So to give him this many compliment, but it's crazy to see that performance mode go in and even the ease of these techniques is unbelievable. So I mean, from the camera guy looking at this stuff, it's great stuff. I know I sound biased, and I know I am, because I've had a fair share of work in this project and a lot of effort, and even the RV trip that we took. It's not an easy thing to do. We went from California all the way back to my hometown of Miami, and in that 2.5 week, we attempted to film as much as possible, going through these inner circles of crystal readers in Sedona, talking to the tarot readers in New Orleans, going to Nashville, which I fell in love with. And it's funny to see all these different walks of life interact with these props, and how you could convert these into actual effects, and how these manifest themselves. And time again, we still had these conversations with these people where they're left, we're telling them, no, these are tricks. We're using tricks. These are, things that are just wordplay. And they're like, no, this is the real deal. This is unbelievable that I'm saying this. I wouldn't ordinarily say this as a skeptic, but this is the real deal. So that was mind blowing to me.
That's one of the criticisms that Peter's work has gotten in the past. People say like, oh, you have to be Peter Turner to pull this off.
Okay.
Nobody else can do this. Pete's the only one that can do this and get these reactions.
Well, the truth of the matter is that there is some, at least from the perspective of me, which I was even looking and telling Peter the other day that I was looking through my notes from like 2013, 2014, and his name popped up because I was looking through his stuff, which is kind of funny because now, we've gone through so many tumultuous moments where, being slammed through a table, being picked up on your shoulders, thrown on a couch, and all the other nefarious things that we've gone into. But it's funny because no, these are workable things, and they're it's just a matter of putting in the time. Even something like I know one of the ones that you've gotten criticism for is just the presentations, for example, for like Isabella Starr and stuff. But it's something that I found myself doing, someone that I never thought would be able to. Like I personally hate the idea of having these sort of, because for that routine, for example, you would have to get through that script. Same thing with Midas Touch. And I find myself performing those quite often, anytime I have the opportunity, just by, again, virtue of practice and putting in the effort. And it's the same with anything. If you're not willing to put the effort in, if you think these are things that are just gonna, hey, here, but which is the benefit of this project, because the truth of the matter is that a lot of the stuff is workable off the back end of just the prop itself. So just the prop existing is enough to carry you through 80% of the work, and all you have to do is just be there and just say a couple things, and the effect manifests itself.
That's awesome. I think, and we're getting kind of long, and I'm gonna ask you guys both one more question, and we'll do Pigcake first, and then Pete can think about what he's gonna say. And you both have touched on this, and I don't think I was even planning on asking this, but I think it's just come up organically. The time that we're living in right now, just where we are, 2025, so much different than when Pete was doing Mentalism and releasing his first stuff. And even with Pigcake's channel, exploring different hacks and wannabe psychics and stuff. Do you think that we are living in a time where people are more open to things that would be, we'll say, spiritual, like with things like Harry Potter and other things that have come out recently? Like if I were just going to cold walk up to somebody and say, hey, can I tell you about Jesus Christ? Or if I were going to say, hey, can I show you a magic trick? I've seen so many people like just go, no, that's okay. I'm walking, like, hey, can I stop? Can I show you something? Can I show you a magic trick? But if you were to walk up to somebody and say, hey, could I read your fortune? Or could I tell you, something about your future? Or, hey, could I interest you in a star sign thing? Do you think people are more open to just a spiritual world now than earlier? Or do you think that's just something we're noticing?
No, I think that there's definitely a more openness to it, because with the influx of technology and the ability to now have somebody be able to, put something on TikTok and you have everybody, it's reinforcing to itself. So people are almost reinforcing their pre-existing beliefs by looking into things that they find interesting. And one of those things that I find myself looking at a lot, especially for my channel personally, is TikTok psychics and psychics that are now using this medium of video, and the fact that they could easily post a video. So it's very funny that you would think it would work the other way, where people would now be more open to finding the opposite and finding skepticism, which that world is open, but there's still a lot of availability of people for having interest in this sort of stuff. And again, with the people that we performed for, or Peter performed for in this project, it's very interesting to see that they came from all walks of life. It was businessmen, it was drunk guys at a bar, it was girls at a bar, it was people in restaurants, people in these tourist heavy areas, from all different walks of life, different belief systems. And for just a moment, they sat down and they watched this guy that could tell them things that he could otherwise not know. And it's very, very interesting, especially in this day and age, because our attention span has gone to zero. It's pretty much as fast as you could put your thumb on the screen and move up is our attention span. And that wasn't the case even, when we were beginning in YouTube. Even I started YouTube 2016. That wasn't the case. People were sort of getting into this long form content. But for them to sit down for 5, 10, sometimes 15 to 20 minutes and sit down with this material and digest it and not really worry about anything else. They might have had a beer there that has pretty much gone warm from just focusing on the stuff that was in this. It's unbelievable to see that. And it's surprising, again, because I'm in that space of social media and seeing attention span go to zero. But these performances really do have an effect, a profound effect on people. And I'm not just saying that because I was, part of it. I've helped Peter, but it's eye-opening. It was really eye-opening to see that sort of reaction from, again, people from all walks of life. So I don't know if Peter has a different take on it.
There's no different take. I just think that what's interesting about this sort of stuff, and I think what's interesting about mentalism in general, for the most part, when it's not arbitrary, is that nobody's more interested in themselves than themselves, right? Yeah. And that's what's interesting about this stuff is when you search online, what you're searching your interests. Mm-hmm. Like you're searching what it is that you want to watch on YouTube. You're deciding what the long form content is that you're going to digest. And I just think it's really interesting when somebody feels that you can tell them more about themselves. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the simple answer. I mean, I screenshotted this, and I'm just going to show you the screenshot. I saw this on Facebook, and this is a genuine post. I'm sure if you went and looked this person up, they're not part of the mentalism world. They're just a random person from my community. This is nothing about me. Mm-hmm. This is just, I'll show you the screenshot so you can see it. So that's a screenshot, and I'll read it. So it says, "Mind blown. A lady has just come up to me near shop, and she said she does readings, and she's just seen I'm a very good person who deserves a good future. And I've a big battle coming, but I'll sort it. I feel cold, laugh out loud." And somebody down in the comments has put, "Whoa." Now think about this. So let's digest what's said here. This is somebody that took their time out of their day to post on their Facebook. They've got arguably more likes on this post than most posts that they've got. Mind blown. A lady has just come up to me near the shop and says she does readings. So somebody's just gone up and said, "Love, I do readings." She's seen I'm a good person. You're a good person, you. Who deserves a good future. So all she said was, "You're a good person that deserves a good future. You've got a big battle coming, but I feel that you'll sort it." That's all she said. 3 sentences and walked away. That were enough for an average Joe to post how mind blown they were on Facebook. Right. Now, you go up to that same person, ask them to pick a card, put it back in, and it jumps to the top. Do you think they're making a post about it on Facebook? So right. The point is that, for me, when I saw that, I screenshotted it, and you can check that out. It's on there. Like it's unbelievable to me that something as simple as those 3 sentences that mean nothing. I do readings. You're a good person. There's a battle coming, but you'll sort it. Is enough for somebody to believe in psychics because it were about them. An interaction that she felt that she wanted to take to her audience on Facebook and share it, and people were equally mind blown in the comments. Check it out, right? Yeah. So the answer to that is, look, we want to understand ourselves, right? What we do is we take things apart, we put them back together. We never see the world the way that people see us, or we never see ourselves the way that the world sees us. And so to be able to spin it round and have a microscope sort of zoom in and examine us, we're ready to listen. And if we agree with it, we agree with it. If we don't, we don't. But when you're saying something that the person already knows and just telling them telling them that, almost like they're looking in a mirror or a looking glass. Do you know what I mean? And they just want to hear more. Can you tell me more? You know, if I said to you, I could tell you exactly what's going to happen to you when you walk outside your house tonight, David, or whatever, or I could tell you, not that I can't tell you that just for the record, but or you know, I can guess what playing card you're thinking of. I think most people would want to know what's going to, just that ominous question of what do you think is going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the point is there is that it doesn't have to be ominous. It can be fun. It can be small. It could be three sentences. Three sentences were enough for somebody to repost and believe that. And do you know why that belief were there?
Why?
Because of the line, "I do readings." That's
Right.
it. That's it. So if that's not a testament to somebody sees a tarot deck, a stack of tarot cards and believes, sees a crystal and believes, you know, touching upon the crystals, I do want to say this before we leave. I know we are going, but touching upon the crystals and other things, the idea with this set is I don't want to do tier systems. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go pledge $135 and this will happen. Pledge $150, this will happen. I don't want to do that. I want to spread the news as far as possible, and I want this to be a community project. So the more time I can spend on R&D, the more, like the crystals, I'm still examining. There's still things that I want to do to them, and there's ways that I want to change them, and there's things that I want to do outside of, say, Kurasuki, or things outside of Witch Hand, things outside of Crystal Voodoo. I'm looking at different ways that I can implement magnetic systems into them and stuff like that. But all of that takes R&D. Outside of the entirety of the box, everything else in there is gimmicked or gimmicked in some way or has some routine that operates in a gimmick sense. The crystals are, for now, just crystals, which on the forefront, you can look at that and go, well, what do they do? But the myriad of routines that I share with them mean that you don't have to go out of your way. I'm providing that prop so that you don't have to
Yeah.
go out of your way to go and find them. I've done that and brought them in. And I know it's a small consolation, but just take some time to go away and look at the price of tarot decks. Take some time to go away and look at the price of a quick Q&A box. Take some time to go look at the price of being able to get your own velvet old egg bag, which is still quite expensive now. You know, you're still looking for vintage ones. These are decent ones.
Yeah.
Take some time to look at the Astro card. And then when you add all of it up and you realize that it's got the video set on there as well, the price is actually very, very reasonable. Very, 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 very reasonable for the hours and hours of content that you're getting. And the
Yeah.
fact that I'm still wanting to develop more. And if you guys can help me do that, you know, it mean the world to me, because I'd love to spend another couple of months just R&Ding, traveling to these places to look at the facilities that are making this stuff, actually taking the time that no other company's done to get a version of these props back and say, I'm happy with these. Do you know that that's important to me? And it's so important
Right.
that you know you get something that's decent. I don't want you to get ESP cards and feel to yourself, do you know what? I wish these had looked like this or felt like this. Or you
Yeah.
get a pen where a spider jumps out of it and it's inserted in there for absolutely no reason at all, other than the fact that that's their idea of what mentalism should be. It's not. It's, for me, I've listened to what's been said in the past. I've taken certain criticisms, I've accepted them. I've listened to people saying, I don't want to learn a script to be able to deliver a routine. I want to be able to do this. And I've catered to both audiences, and I want to be able to develop the props to the best they can be. And that's what I'm asking you for. I've already injected and invested time and a lot of money into this, but I don't have endless resources and endless finances to be able to go away and do this. I'm not a company like Murphy's Magic, and I'm not illusionist, and I don't have these people in my pocket, and I'm not trying to produce 50,000 of whatever to be able to get them at 5 cents a piece. What I'm trying to do is just cater to the audience that's there. And right now I don't know what that is. So
Mm.
that's what this Kickstarter is allowing. And the you know, from the bottom of my heart, like I said the other day on the Kickstarter, when it funded in under 10 minutes, I was blown away. Absolutely blown away, because I never believed in a million years that that'd be something that's possible. So all I'm saying is, if you're interested in this stuff, you've listened to what I've had to say, or you've even just been interested 1% in what it is that I do, take a chance. Do you know what I mean? And get it, because what it ultimately does is the more backers, the more time I've got on R&D, and it'll be better for everybody. This is our
Yeah.
project. Let's make it something special, you know. And let's
Right.
prove that we don't need these big companies to do it. You know what I mean? We don't need them. We can do this together as a community.
Yeah. At the
So,
very beginning of this, you were talking about how you frame yourself, and if you say you're a mentalist or you say you're a magician, and how people believe you. Your Facebook post story made me remember that my so a Facebook post I saw. So I'm in the wedding industry, and so I see lots of posts from wedding coordinators and brides and people looking for this or that. And I did just this week. A wedding coordinator posted and she said, "Hey, my bride is really interested in somebody who can do readings, somebody who can do tarot, somebody who does palm readings and things like that. Do you guys know anybody?" And in my head, the first thing I thought was, "Oh, that's not me, because I'm a magician, right? I do card tricks, so that's not me." But even with the little bit of knowledge that you're, talking about with your kit, it's just about how you frame yourself. There's no reason why any magician couldn't reach out and say, "Oh yeah, that's me. I can do that." And you just bring your set and you just make some tweaks, to it, and then it would be so much harder the opposite way. It'd be so much harder for a psychic to say, "Oh yeah, I can do card tricks. I'm a magician," right?
Exactly.
But for a magician to say, "Oh, I'm gonna start getting some of those bookings as well. I'm gonna start taking some of that money and putting that on my plate too." And yeah, if you want that, I'll do that. You want that, I'll do that.
And you don't have to change anything. Take the card effects that you already know, something as simple as a crosscut, and you've got a 5-minute routine now where you don't need to do anything. You've got a 5, and you leave, and just the same as that screenshot that you saw, you have to convince them that you're not psychic. Think about
Right.
that. For something as simple as just producing those cards and doing something as simple as a crosscut, you're having to fight to tell them that you're not a psychic. It's unbelievable because that's how the real world thinks.
Right.
And in the wedding industry, like you say, a lot of the time there's a lot of people that are interested in that stuff, and you don't need to go in saying you're a psychic. They're just asking for people to give readings. Never once when I go do Hugo Boss or I'm doing like GK and like Men's Magazine and other things, or GQ or whatever it is, I'm not claiming to be a medium or a psychic. I'm going in there and I'm just presenting it of that style with a little bit more of a story. Sometimes, quick punch. If I feel this group are not interested, I'll just grab their attention really quick. I've learned ways to use I talk about DFB on this set. I don't provide DFB in this box. And if DFB, digital force bag, for anybody watching that doesn't know, I have a really interesting presentation for digital force bag that gets shared on this set that says, "Look, take what you already know and just learn to dress it like this," so that you can go out and you can use that in the real world if you wanted. But it's like just maximizing the mileage of what you already do. Take what I'm doing, even if you take 1% of it, and like you just said, you're opening yourself up to new worlds, new conversations, new people. And if you just want to expand upon what you do with your family and friends, or you just want to impress people in the pub, cut the time down and just present this as psychological if you want, or present this as if you're experimenting, or just present it with its bare bones and you could strip away the technique and just use the prop.
Yeah. Hey, I want to thank you guys both for talking to me. It sounds like a great project. I hope people go and check out the Kickstarter. We want to just finish this off and make this like positive for anybody, whether Peter Turner or Pigcake is actually psychic. We can put it to the test right now, right? So what card am I holding? I'll give you each the opportunity to say. And bear in mind, I'm a magician.
Okay, so
it's not a joker.
No,
it's not a joker.
Okay, so let me caveat with a question, right?
I can like, unless Pigcake wants to answer first.
You answer first.
Jack of spades.
Oh, no.
Okay, so the card's obviously a red card, or a black one, and I don't know which, right? So you didn't do the magician's thing of going for a club, did you?
No.
Okay, so just do. This is a number card, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is just in your head, you're going to change this. But if it's a high number in your mind, change to a low number for me. And if it's a low number, change to a high number. Just so you've got something completely different in your head, right? So I'd probably
Different than this?
Yeah, other than that. So if I were to take a guess on that, I'd probably say, I'm just going to go for it. If I were going to guess, probably the 3 or 4 of spades I'd go for.
And you're really close. Yeah, you're really close.
2 of spades. What is it? Can I see? Oh, there we
5.
go. There
Yeah.
we go. Close enough. But that's, again, if you...
And Pigcake said spade. You were there, right?
Yeah,
You got half of it.
I got it.
I were off by 1. I could have claimed the 4
it off.
In my wallet, I have a nada.
Yeah, there we are. I'm always happy to take it.
Almost psychic.
David, thank you for absolutely everything. Thank you for having us on your channel. Thank you for taking the time. And
Yeah.
also, everybody that's watched this, thank you for everything that you do. And one thing, if you're not subscribed to David's channel and you've come across this by accident, honestly, like I said to David, I'm a massive fan of his channel. Like, subscribe, and just follow what he does because he's amazing at reviewing things, and his content's always top notch.
That's the
Thank you.
best.
Don't subscribe
right.
to
Yeah, and Pigcake. And
no,
Pigcake.
don't subscribe to Pigcake.
Oh, no, not
David.
Pigcake.
David.
Not Pigcake. Just David. He's over there. We're all in different places, but there we go.
All right. See you later, guys.
Take
Thank you,
care.
David.